just to recap, what I'm hearing or what I'm taking from this is that the, let's say, semi-abrasive persona that you reflect online some of the time is partially by design.
It's 100% by design. Go on. Yeah, it's 100%. I've addressed that several times with the word theatricality, even in the title of the video. I have talked about that. And like, in a sense, I'm almost flattered. Like, if you think the reason why that video about Jacqueline Glenn is so hard-hitting is that I lack self-control and that's who I really am, that really tells you how great an actor I am. Right? Like, if that's how you read that video, as opposed to you watch that video and you go, this is a kid who grew up doing classes in the theater. This is a kid who won an award for playwriting when he was 15 or something. You know, this is a kid who came out of the theater and who knows how to take a complex idea in politics or philosophy and then put together an on-camera performance that dramatizes it with no special effects, no costume, no script, not much in the way of lighting or makeup, you know, and make something dramatic and impactful out of it, because that's what it is. It is theatrical in the truest sense of the word. If you were to ask the question, how did this start? How did I start having this design, for what I do on YouTube? It is in large part a reaction against the university professors I've known. I knew all these people who took the measure of intellect and imagination they had in life and went into a library and they lost their soul. You know, when they came out of the library, it wasn't a man anymore. It was a bureaucrat. And it's this rejection of the real world reality of academia, of who those professors were, of the men they became. Reacting against all that, I came out of the gate on YouTube, yes, with this design, as you put it, that this is how I'm going to broach these issues. So that's why I come on the mic in the way that I do, and I say, hey, you know, you might think this controversy about Onision is meaningless, but it's not. It's really meaningful to me, and here's why. And you know, some of my videos on Onision I do think are really profound philosophically. Some of them I think are interesting politically and whatever. I actually think I have something meaningful to say about Onision. And sure, about Aristotle, communism, veganism, about a million other topics, sometimes more self-evidently profound. What you're positing fundamentally would be that having a kind of emotionally neutral delivery would be advantageous in all situations, or maybe just most situations. And, I think that has very real disadvantages also. I understand your concern. But I mean, I think another kind of criterion to bring to this would be to ask. So this isn't the question you're asking. This would be a stronger question to demand of me. You could ask, Eisel, your theatrical behavior, do you think it makes you more friends or makes you more enemies? Or like, is this a good way to make friends? So I just say that would be your same kind of objection, but more forcefully stated. And my answer to that is, by being really honest with people, I make the right friends. Because if I came on, if I were phony or I really pretended to be someone I'm not, then the people who might want to be friends with me, they wouldn't be the right people. So people get to see, hey, I'm really passionate about this issue. I'm really indifferent to this other issue. I'm pissed off about this or that. And then, the right people will respond to that in the right way. And, I really accept that, I can't be friends with everyone and that, I'm going to alienate some people that way. It's true. But like to give a very real example, I would have more friends if I pretended to be a socialist, or even if I pretended to be a communist sympathizer or communist supporter. I really would. And you can look at veganism is very left-wing. Within my lifetime, it would have been as a winning strategy, I could have been a phony far leftist of one kind or another, whether I was an SJW or a socialist or what have you. Even now, there's pressure on me to just be an uncritical supporter of Bernie Sanders, and I'm not. I don't really see how it can be coherent, even like on a psychological level, for me to dissimulate being someone other than I am and feeling something other than I am for the value of an abstract friendship that I don't I wouldn't value myself. The right people who look at that performance and can see my feeling, can see what I feel, what I feel as well as what I think, the right people will become my friends. And by being phony or being insincere, I don't think that would lead to those positive outcomes. As I say, it's true, if you took a more insincere approach, you'd make more friends, but they would be the wrong friends.
And I suspect that if somehow it was the exact same information, but just tweaked, and this maybe doesn't matter, but just tweaked in a way where they don't get that vibe, maybe that would be not a video of yours, but maybe there would be more people, because are people responding to your video game criticism? I guess
Yes. So we covered that last time. In the edited version, I had screenshots of people writing into me saying, "Oh, this changed their lives." Yes, and I think one of the most telling examples of how this more raw, authentic, confrontational style of how effective it is the people who saw a video like that once, thought, "This can't be true, I can't believe it, this is wrong," kind of slunk away for a few months, and then came back a few months later and said, "Wow, you're right. I've changed my whole life. It opened my eyes." But where they didn't accept it right away. And by the way, another great example of that was communism. I have a video, I'm forgetting the title right now, but it's something like, "Can you deprogram a brainwashed communist?" And I'm doing this dialogue. I'm talking directly to someone who is basically a brainwashed communist. I later learned more about her life because she talked to me more. And during that dialogue, during that discussion, she's 100% pro-communist, 100% brainwashed, not willing to take on any of the arguments I present. It's this very confrontational, just like you're describing, the same way I'm confrontational about video games, saying, "Look, this is good, this is evil, let's face up to it." So I'm really giving it to her raw. And during that conversation, it doesn't get to her. Later, she heard the video back. A few months go by. She watched my other videos about the history of communism and Marxism. She starts doing some reading. She starts going back. Like, I think she took books off her shelf that she read years ago and is like reconsidering how did she kind of brainwash herself into this step by step. She's looking back at it, and she got in touch with me a couple months later. She had completely lost faith in communism and had basically become a mainstream democratic person. So yes, it works. Yes, it works. And, I've been confronting people across a huge range of ideologies, not just Christianity, Buddhism, communism, meat eating, but also neo-Nazis, right-wingers, and racists. I've taken on those issues. I've taken on Black Lives Matter, and I've taken on a huge range of things. And yes, it gets results. And yes, I get emails letting me know that it works. And here's the other thing. It's totally reasonable that you ask the question of, would you reach more people? What kind of person do you want to reach? Right? I've never been catering to the stupidest 80% of the audience. I think it's debatable whether or not I'm even catering to the stupidest 90% of the audience. I am only and exclusively catering to the people who have the most initiative, the most intelligence, the most ambition, the most imagination. Like, I'm really looking for the best of the best. And those are people who are capable of hearing that argument, whether it's about video games or communism or whatever, and maybe not in that moment thinking about it. All these debates where I've gotten so much pushback, so much hatred in response, where I stood up and said, "Hey, look, if you're an atheist, stop celebrating Christmas." You have no idea how many atheists made hate videos against me. Like, "How dare you say that? I'm an atheist, but I still celebrate Christmas, and I still go to church, and I still..." People come back to you in this stupid way. But those are the stupidest people, right? That's the 80% or whatever it is of idiots and nuts. The people who get in touch with you and say, "Wow, you know what, man, that video you made about the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, I really had to think about it for a while. At first I was defensive, and now I realize you're really making an important point. You really opened my eyes." Even my experience in veganism was like that. Great example, real quick. My critique of Gary Yourofsky. So that was really hated. People were shocked. I said, Gary Yourofsky is pro-violence and pro-terrorism, and I'm anti-violence and anti-terrorism. Here are the facts, right? And I really laid it down. Yes, I got emails saying, "How dare you? Why don't you just do the same kind of namby-pamby content all the other vegans do on YouTube? Let's just use namby-pamby for the sake of simplicity. Why don't you just cheerlead?" But yes, I also got those emails from people saying, "Wow, this was invaluable." Some people said it opened their eyes to something they didn't know about. Other people said, "You know what? After watching your video a couple times over a couple months, I had to admit to myself this was something I did know about, and I was choosing to ignore it. They're like, there were people writing to me saying they've been to those vegan meetings that were endorsing violence and terrorism, and they were lying to themselves about it. They were telling themselves, okay, and then they see this video that really confronts them and says, no, this is terrorism. Like, face up, like, think about what you're making. You're saying it's nonviolence, but it's not, So no, if you say you're going to alienate part of the audience by confronting the other part, it's completely true. It's completely reasonable criticism. What percentage of Chinese people are willing to listen to a critique of the communist government of China? What percentage of Americans are willing to listen to me really say that I think the American Constitution is so awful that it should be completely torn up and rewritten, that America should have a new constitution? Like, my position as a dissident necessarily alienates me from a mass audience, but I can still have a really meaningful relationship with a minority of the audience. And, 1% of the population of the United States of America would still be an enormous audience.
Just to recap, what I'm hearing, or what I'm taking from this, is that the, let's say, semi-abrasive persona that you reflect online some of the time is partially by design. That fits into your
it's 100% by design. Go on. Yeah, it's 100%. Yeah.
Well, I say partially because it seems like part of it is just you. It's not like something you need to design. It's just who you are, and then there's an element of kind of channeling that in a particular way.
So I gotta answer that. This is a great statement. But I'm going to answer it as if it's a question. I'm also someone who went and researched Buddhism and did humanitarian work in Southeast Asia, right? So it's 100% by design. It's not. If you were to ask the question, how did this start? How did I start having this design, for what I do on YouTube? It is in large part a reaction against the university professors I've known. I've known so many people with PhDs, and they wrote books that like 10 people read. I used to work in the nonfiction publishing industry also, where we took the books and essays written by those people with PhDs and published them with books, and you see the numbers. You see how many copies a year sell, and it's shockingly close to zero. I knew all these people who took the measure of intellect and imagination they had in life and went into a library, and they lost their soul. When they came out of the library, it wasn't a man anymore. It was a bureaucrat. Those are the professors I've known in many, many, many different fields. Within Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist scholarship, I knew these guys. They'd never even been to Asia. They're talking about Cambodia. They've never seen the poverty in Cambodia. They never saw the war. They never, and they lived through the war. I mean, these guys are older than me. You didn't go. You didn't meet those. You didn't do humanitarian work. You also just didn't witness it or interview those people. And it doesn't have to be Cambodia. I mean, it could be Tibet. It could be India. It could be all these other things. You say you're an historian, but the history in your own life has unfolded and passed you by, and you didn't make a difference. And the saddest part of all is they pour years of their life into writing these essays and publishing these books that nobody cares about and that don't make any difference in the world. So, it's 100% by design. It's taking the background I already had in the theater, starting in high school. And in some ways I was raised in a theatrical family. In some ways I grew up with the theater. No, digressing it too. But yeah, I had a background in the theater, I had a background in performing arts, including playwriting. I'm an award-winning playwright, believe it or not. It took my experience with going to City Hall, with being involved in politics in real life, face-to-face, the theatricality of that, the background I had in ancient Greek philosophy, all this stuff, and it's this rejection of the real-world reality of academia, of who those professors were, of the men they became, and how fruitless their efforts were, that their struggles were for nothing, even if they really did have expertise, like even if they knew something meaningful from their years of research, that it goes nowhere and doesn't matter. So, reacting against all that, I came out of the gate on YouTube, yes, with this design, as you put it, that this is how I'm going to broach these issues. So that's why I come on the mic in the way that I do, and I say, hey, you might think this controversy about Onision is meaningless, but it's not. It's really meaningful to me, and here's why. And some of my videos on Onision I do think are really profound philosophically. Some of them I think are interesting politically and what have you. I actually think I have something meaningful to say about Onision. And sure, about Aristotle, communism, veganism, about a million other topics, sometimes more self-evidently profound.
have you ever experienced that, like, by being calm and relaxed and not using theatricality to prove your point, that you will have nothing to lose, so why do you need to use theatricality?
Okay, so I think there is something to lose. I think there is a real disadvantage to not being theatrical. And you see that in democracy in ancient times and still today. So, in American government, in the American system of Congress and the Senate, when people were arguing against cigarettes, that cigarettes cause cancer, they brought in heartbreaking examples of people whose lives had been destroyed by cigarettes, and they stood there in front of Congress and they broke down weeping. I mean, this is a significant form of theatricality. Seatbelts, trying to get laws about seatbelts, even the debates legally about the side effects of certain medicines. They bring in people whose lives have been destroyed, or father whose daughter was killed, and they give really passionate voice to that. Another infamous example, by the way, in putting together the case for the Iraq War, they brought in someone who had allegedly, was talking about suffering in the Iraq War, and it was later revealed that this was to some extent a phony or misleading instance. Just within modern American politics, the Vietnam War, Iraq War, and so on, the theatricality is a really significant part of democracy. Now, could I come on YouTube and talk about vegan activism in a completely dispassionate or even robotic way? I could. It's a choice not to. Could I talk about my own divorce or my own personal life in a dispassionate way? I could. It's a choice not to. So, I'm just saying I'm someone who's consciously aware of that, and there's a certain level of theatricality in my YouTube videos, and there is in real life also. I would say, as a very real example that many people in here will have experienced, what if you are begging with a police officer or a border guard, someone who has real direct power over you, power of life and death and power to fuck up your life? What if you have to convince someone in that position to do the right thing or that you're honest? Being robotic or dispassionate or something, or not expressing your case emotionally is not in your favor. So I think theatricality is an important part of public life, including YouTube and including formal democracy and informal situations we're all in. Sure. The other consideration is the audience, what the performance means for the audience. I don't think I'm going to just one more sentence. I don't think living a lie is good for me. I don't think it's good for him, and I don't think it's good for the audience either. I don't. I think that authenticity and really sharing how you feel about things, I think is good for me, is good for him, and is good for the audience. That's how I honestly feel about that.